The sun was cruel on the desert world, hanging like a ball of fire in the empty sky. Winds carried dust across the cracked ground, and the air burned in every breath. In the middle of this endless wasteland stood a young alien girl, her pale blue skin covered with sweat and dust, her long dark hair sticking to her face. Around her lay 3 great beasts, her beloved pets, their bodies stretched out on the ground, their tongues dry, their throats making weak sounds. They were strong creatures once, tall and proud, with golden eyes and thick fur. But now they were too weak to rise. Their sides moved up and down slowly, each breath a fight. The alien girl knelt beside them, her hands trembling as she tried to comfort them. She pressed her face against the warm fur of the largest beast, whispering, "Hold on, please hold on. I will find water." But her voice cracked because she knew the truth. There was no water here. Not for many miles. She looked around desperately, waving her arms at passing figures, other travelers crossing the desert road. They saw her beasts dying, but none of them stopped. Some shook their heads. Others laughed coldly. Why waste water on animals? They are only beasts, they said, walking on. The girl's heart ached, her eyes filling with tears. They are not just beasts, they are my family, she whispered. The sun beat harder, the beasts groaned louder, and her hope began to slip away. She pressed her forehead to the ground, crying, "Please, someone, help me, please." That was when she heard footsteps, slow and heavy, crunching on the dry sand. She lifted her head and saw a figure coming closer. It was not one of her people, not one of the desert traders. It was a human. He was tall and lean, with sunburned skin and tired eyes. A worn cloak covered his shoulders, and at his side hung a small metal canteen. He stopped a few steps away, watching her silently. The alien girl wiped her tears quickly. Afraid. Her people always said humans were strange, reckless, and dangerous. She expected him to laugh like the others, or to walk away without a word. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice rough from thirst. "Your beasts. They are dying." The girl looked at him with wide eyes. "Yes, they need water, please. Do you have any?" Her voice was desperate, but she could see the way his hand rested on his canteen, how tightly he held it. She knew what it meant. He had water, but maybe only enough for himself. The human crouched down, his eyes meeting hers for a long moment. He said nothing, only listening to the ragged breaths of the beasts. Then, slowly, he unhooked the canteen from his belt. The girl gasped, "No. You cannot. You need it. You will die." Her people would never give water to animals. Never, but the human ignored her words. He opened the canteen, tilting it carefully. A few drops of water fell into the mouth of the smallest beast. The creature's tongue moved weakly, swallowing. Its eyes blinked open for a moment, looking at him. The girl covered her mouth in shock. You are saving them." The human did not answer. He only moved to the second beast. Pouring again, drop by drop, his face was calm, but his hands shook from weakness. Sweat rolled down his forehead, his lips dry and cracked. Still he gave. The alien girl watched, her heart racing. Every drop he poured was a drop he would never drink. Every drop was his life. She could not understand it. Why would he do this for her beasts, when her own people would not? The third beast lifted its head weakly, licking the water from his hand. The girl's eyes filled with tears again. But this time they were not only of sadness. She whispered, "You are different. No one else would do this." The human finally stopped. Looking into the canteen, it was empty. He closed it slowly, tying it back to his belt. Though it had nothing left, he stood, swaying slightly from exhaustion. The beasts were still weak, but alive, their breaths less shallow now. Their eyes open. The girl stared at him, unable to speak. The human turned to leave, but his steps were slow, heavy. He had given away everything, and now the desert would claim him. The girl's heart pounded as she watched him walk. She realized with horror that he had traded his own life for the lives of her pets. She called out, "Wait, don't go." But her voice shook. Her beasts stirred beside her, alive because of him. The suspense hung in the dry air. Would she let him walk to his death, or would she follow and repay the sacrifice of the human who gave his last drop? The desert was silent after the human walked away. The alien girl's heart beat fast, watching his back grow smaller in the haze of heat. Her pets breathed weakly beside her, alive but fragile, saved by only a few drops. She pressed her hand on the ground, torn between fear and gratitude. Her people had always told her stories about humans, foolish creatures, reckless, soft. But the one she had just seen was not foolish. He was something else. He had given away everything for beasts that were not his, beasts her own people would not have helped. Her throat tightened, her tears drying in the hot air. Why would he do this? She whispered. The human staggered forward across the sand, his steps slow. The sun beat down on his shoulders, and the empty canteen knocked gently against his side. He did not look back. He did not ask for thanks. It was as if he had accepted his fate. The alien girl's beasts shifted, one of them lifting its head weakly. Its golden eyes followed the human, and a soft, broken sound escaped its throat. The girl's chest ached at the sight. Her family had been saved by him. She stood quickly, brushing dust from her knees, her legs trembling. "Stay," she whispered to her beasts. Placing her hands on their fur, she turned and ran after him, her bare feet kicking sand, her breath sharp. When she reached him, he had already slowed, his shoulders swaying as if each step was too heavy. She grabbed his arm, her voice shaking. "You will die without water. You gave too much." The human looked at her with tired eyes, his lips cracked, but he gave a faint smile, almost peaceful. "They are alive." "That is enough," he said quietly. The girl stared at him, her heart confused. She had never heard words like this, not from her people. Her people counted every drop, measured every breath, never gave without return. But this human had given all, and asked nothing. Why? She asked softly. He turned his head to the side, watching the horizon shimmer in the heat. "Because life, any life, deserves a chance." The girl felt her throat tighten. She wanted to argue, but she could not. His words struck her deeper than she expected. She lowered her eyes, ashamed that she had begged strangers from her own people, and they had turned away. Yet this stranger from another world had listened. Behind them, her beasts gave weak cries. The human stopped, turning slightly. The girl looked too, her heart pulling in two directions. Her family needed her, but so did he. She made her choice. "Come with me," she said firmly, grabbing his arm again. "My village is not far. I will take you there. They must help you." The human shook his head slowly. "Your people will not welcome me." His voice was calm, but his body trembled from thirst. The girl clenched her fists. "Don't care what they say. You saved them, and I will not let you die." The human studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Together they walked back toward the beasts. The creatures lifted their heads, their ears twitching weakly as the human approached. They made soft, grateful sounds. Leaning toward him, the girl watched in awe. Her pets already trusted him. Even in their weakness, the desert wind rose, throwing dust into their eyes. The human stumbled, and the girl caught his arm, steadying him. She saw how pale his face had become, how dry his lips were. A shadow of fear fell over her. He might not survive the journey to her village. She turned quickly, tearing a strip from her dress and wrapping it around his head to shield him from the sun. He looked at her, surprised. "Why help me?" he asked. She answered without thinking. "Because you helped first." The beasts began to rise slowly, shaky on their legs. The human reached out, touching the neck of the largest one. The creature leaned into his hand, steadying itself. Girl's eyes widened. Never had she seen her beasts accept a stranger so quickly. She felt something shift inside her heart, something she could not explain. Together, they began walking toward the horizon. The girl led. The beasts followed, and the human walked in silence. Each step heavy, the air shimmered with heat, and the ground seemed endless. Every so often the girl looked back, worried. The human's face grew weaker, his steps slower, but he did not complain. As the sun began to sink lower, painting the sky with red fire, the village's tall stone towers appeared in the distance. Relief filled the girl's chest, but fear came with it too. Her people did not like outsiders, and they would not understand why she brought a human. But she could not turn back now. She glanced at him again, his head bowed, his body nearly stumbling. Her heart whispered a promise. She would protect him as he had protected her beasts. The beasts walked close to him, as if guarding him now, their golden eyes glowing in the dying light. The girl lifted her chin, determination burning inside her. The desert had taken much from her, but it would not take the human who had given everything. Not while she still had breath. The suspense deepened with every step closer to the village. Walls, would her people accept him, or would they cast him out? Would he survive long enough to see another sunrise? The desert gave no answer, only silence. But the human walked on, his fate now tied with hers, and in her heart, the alien girl felt something she had never felt before, hope born from the last drop of water. The desert night came quickly, covering the land in cold darkness. The burning sun was gone, but now the air was sharp and dry, the stars above shining like white fire. The alien girl walked with her beasts close behind, their heavy steps shaking the ground. Beside her walked the human, his body weak, his breaths shallow. She looked at him from the corner of her eyes. His lips were cracked, his skin pale, and yet he walked without complaint. Every step looked painful, but he did not ask for rest. The girl's chest tightened. He had given everything, and now his life hung by a thread. The tall stone towers of her village were still far away, glowing faintly under the moons. Her people lived behind high walls, guarding their water, counting every drop. She knew the truth. If she brought the human there, they would call him a fool. They would not give him water. They would not forgive her for wasting time on an outsider. Her heart was torn in two. If she led him to the village, he might die at the gates, rejected by her people. If she left him here in the desert, he would surely die alone. And still, when she looked at him, she remembered the sight of his hands pouring water into the mouths of her beasts. The beasts made low, rumbling sounds, walking close to the human. They brushed against him, steadying his steps. Protecting him, the girl frowned, her heart confused. Why would her beasts trust him more than her people? She stopped walking, the cold wind pulling at her hair. "You cannot keep walking like this," she said softly. The human looked at her, his tired eyes glowing faintly in the starlight. "I must. Your beasts still need care, and you need to reach safety." Her voice shook. "But you gave your water. You will die before we reach the village." The human gave a faint smile, though his legs trembled. If that is the price, then it was worth it. The girl felt anger rise in her chest, anger and fear. She clenched her fists, shouting, "Why? Why do you keep saying that? No one gives their life for animals, no one. My people would call you mad." The human stopped, his shadow long in the moonlight. He looked at her with steady eyes, even as his body shook. "Then maybe it takes a madman to remind the world what life is worth." The words struck her heart like a blade. She could not reply. She could only stand in silence, her throat tight. Her choice grew heavier, the desert wind whispering against her ears. Should she turn toward the village, risk her people's wrath, and try to save him? Or should she keep walking alone, pretending he never existed? The largest beast stepped forward, its golden eyes shining. It lowered its head, pressing gently against the human's side, almost carrying him. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Her beasts had made their choice already. They had chosen the human. She wiped her face quickly, taking a deep breath. "Then I choose too," she whispered. The human looked at her, puzzled, but she did not explain. Not yet. They continued forward, the towers of the village growing closer with every step. The girl's chest tightened with fear. She could already imagine the faces of her people, their sharp eyes, their harsh voices, their laughter. They would call the human weak, foolish, unworthy. They would call her reckless for bringing him. But still she walked, her beasts followed. Their steps strong again, their eyes glowing with life. And the human walked beside her, though his strength was nearly gone. Hours passed until finally the walls of the village rose tall before them, stone carved from the desert itself, strong and ancient. Torches burned at the gates, and 2 guards stood with spears in hand. They saw the girl, they saw her beasts, and then their eyes fell on the human. Their faces hardened instantly. One guard raised his hand, shouting, "Stop! Outsiders are not welcome here." The girl's heart pounded, but she stepped forward, lifting her chin. "He saved them," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "Without him, my beasts would be dead." The guards exchanged looks. One of them sneered. "A human? Wasting water on beasts? He is not a savior, he is a fool." The other nodded. "Turn him away, he will not enter these walls." The girl's hands trembled, but she spread her arms wide, standing in front of the human. "Then you turn me away as well, because I will not leave him." Her voice echoed against the stone. Her beasts growled behind her, their teeth bared. The guards stepped back slightly, uneasy. The human whispered weakly, "You do not need to fight for me." The girl turned, her eyes wet. "You fought for them when no one else would. Now it is my turn." The silence stretched long in the cold air. The guards hesitated, looking at the beasts, at the girls. Determined eyes. Finally one of them lowered his spear, muttering, "The elders will decide." The gates creaked open slowly, shadows spilling out. The girl's chest filled with both relief and dread. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back now. The human leaned against the beasts for support as they entered. The villagers were already gathering, their whispers sharp and cold. She lifted her head high. Though fear burned in her chest, the choice had been made. The question was no longer hers, it was the village's. Would they let the human live, or would they let him die after all he had given? The gates of the village closed behind them with a deep thud. The alien girl felt the heavy eyes of her people watching from every side. Villagers gathered quickly, drawn by the sight of the human walking beside her, his steps unsteady, his lips dry. Her beasts growled low, protective, their golden eyes glowing in the torchlight. Whispers spread like fire through the crowd. A human? Here? Why bring him inside the walls? Foolish girl, does she not know the danger? The girl's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. She would not let them see her fear. She would not let them turn their backs on the one who had saved her family. The human stood quietly, his body trembling from weakness. He did not speak. He did not defend himself. He only rested a hand gently on the side of one beast, steadying himself. The beast leaned into him as if to say, "You are one of us now." An elder stepped forward, tall and wrapped in heavy robes. His eyes were sharp, his voice cold. "What is this you bring to us, child?" he demanded. The girl bowed her head, but her voice was firm. "This human saved my beasts. Without him they would be dead." The crowd erupted in laughter and anger. Saved beasts? At the cost of his life? A fool, nothing more. Why should we care for animals when water is worth more than gold? The elder raised his hand and the noise fell silent. His gaze was heavy on the human. "Is this true? Did you give your water to the beasts?" The human lifted his head slowly, his voice faint but steady. "Yes. They were dying. I gave what I had." Gasps and murmurs spread through the villagers. Some spat on the ground, disgusted. Others shook their heads, whispering words of pity or disbelief. The elder's eyes narrowed. "You gave your water to animals, knowing you would die? Foolishness, waste. Why should we give you more when you wasted what you had?" The girl stepped forward quickly, her fists clenched. "Because no one else would. Not one of you stopped when I begged. You all walked past, but he gave everything. My beasts live because of him." The villagers muttered again, their voices divided. Some sneered, but some looked uneasy, glancing at the beasts who stood strong again, alive because of the human sacrifice. The elder's face hardened. And what of our people? If we give him water, that is less for us. Less for our children, less for our future. Why should an outsider take from us? The girl's voice shook, but she shouted, because he has already given what none of you would. He gave his life for mine. Her words echoed against the stone walls. The human remained silent, his head bowed, but his presence itself was louder than her voice. His weakness, his sacrifice, his calm silence, it told a truth that no villager could deny. The crowd began to argue among themselves. Some shouted, "Cast him out." Others muttered, "He is different, he is not like us." The beasts growled louder, standing in a protective circle around the human, their fur bristling. The villagers stepped back in fear, realizing the creatures would fight if the human was harmed. The elder's eyes flashed with anger. "Enough," he barked. He looked at the girl, his voice sharp. "You bring danger to us. You let feelings blind you. The human is not one of us. He is weak, he is reckless, he is nothing but a burden." The girl's eyes burned with tears, but she raised her chin. "No, he is stronger than you know. You see weakness, but I see courage. You see waste, but I see life. Without him, my family would be dead, and I would be alone." The elder glared, his voice cutting. "Then you choose him over your people?" The words fell heavy in the cold air. The girl's chest ached, but she did not step back. She looked at the human, standing weak but calm, and then at her beasts who growled with loyalty. Finally she whispered, "Yes, if I must choose, I choose him." The villagers gasped, shocked. The elder's face twisted with fury. "Then let it be the storm that judges," he declared, raising his hand to the sky. At that moment, the wind howled through the desert. Sharp and wild, dark clouds rolled across the stars, lightning flashing in the distance. A great dust storm was rising, fierce and deadly. The people turned in fear, rushing to secure their homes, shouting to gather children. The elder shouted, "See? Even the desert itself rejects your choice. Let the storm take the human if he truly belongs here." The girl's heart thundered in her chest. She looked at the human, who stood swaying, his strength nearly gone. She looked at the beasts, who pressed close to him, ready to shield him from the storm. She clenched her fists, whispering to herself, "Then I will fight the storm, I will fight all of them, but I will not let him die." The first wave of sand crashed against the walls, roaring like thunder. The torches flickered and died. The village plunged into chaos as the storm struck, and in the middle of it all, the humans stood with nothing left. But the girl and her beasts stood with him, and the judgment of the village was no longer in words. It would be written in the storm. The desert roared as the storm rolled closer. The sky turned black, lightning flashed across the horizon, and the sound of thunder shook the ground. Winds rose like claws, tearing sand from the earth and hurling it into the air. The villagers shouted, running for cover, their robes whipping wildly in the fierce wind. The alien girl stood at the village square, her beasts pressing close to her, their fur bristling against the coming danger. The human swayed on his feet, his body weak, but his eyes steady as he looked toward the gates. He had faced storms before, but never one this strong. The desert itself seemed angry, a wall of sand rushing toward the village like a living monster. The elder's voice rose. "Above the chaos, seal the homes, protect the wells. Let the storm judge the fool who wastes water on beasts." His words cut through the night, but many villagers hesitated. They looked at the human, standing tall despite his weakness. They remembered the girl's words. They remembered the beasts now alive, and they felt doubt for the first time. The human bent down, steadying himself against the largest beast. His voice was rough, but strong. "Tie the gates, secure the roofs, bring the children inside quickly." The villagers stared at him, shocked. He gave orders as if he were one of them. Some wanted to ignore him, but others saw the truth in his eyes. This was not a man who thought of himself. This was someone who thought of everyone. The girl shouted. 2, her voice rising with the storm. Listen to him. Do as he says, or the storm will destroy us all. At first, only a few obeyed, rushing to fasten the wooden gates with heavy chains. But as the wind howled louder, more followed, securing roofs with ropes, dragging frightened children into shelters. The storm slammed into the village like a hammer. Sand whirled through the streets, cutting skin like blades. The torches went out, plunging the square into darkness lit only by flashes of lightning. The human stumbled, coughing as sand filled the air. The girl caught his arm, holding him up. You cannot stand in this, you will die, she shouted through the storm. But he shook his head, his voice hoarse. Not yet. They need help. A loud crack split the air as one of the gates burst loose. The storm forced its way in, sending debris flying through the square. Children screamed, women cried, and men struggled to push the gates back into place. The human pulled free from the girl, rushing toward the broken gate. The beasts roared and followed, their massive bodies shielding him from the worst of the sand. The villagers gasped, watching as the human, weak and half-broken, pressed his shoulder against the heavy wood. The beasts pushed too, their muscles straining, their roars louder than the storm. Together, they forced the gate closed, the chains rattling as villagers rushed to lock them tight. The girl's heart pounded. He had nothing left. No water, no strength, yet he still gave more. She shouted to the villagers, Do you see now? Do you see what he is? Another strike of lightning hit, shattering part of a tower. Stones fell, crashing toward a group of children. The human saw it, and without hesitation he ran, throwing himself forward. He dragged 2 children out of the way, shielding another. With his own body, the stones smashed to the ground, dust and rubble exploding around him. The girl screamed, rushing toward him. The human coughed, blood on his lips, but he pushed the children into her arms. Keep them safe, he said weakly. Storm raged on, but the beasts surrounded the human, their massive bodies forming a shield. Their eyes glowed golden in the darkness, their fur whipping wildly. It was as if they had sworn to protect him as one of their own. The villagers watched in silence now, their anger fading, replaced by awe. This human, this outsider, gave more for them than many of their own would. He had no reason, no promise of reward, yet he fought for them as if their lives were his own. The elder's voice faltered when he spoke again. He will not survive this. But there was no power in his words anymore, because the people no longer looked to him. Their eyes were on the human. The storm howled for hours, testing the walls, tearing roofs, shaking the very ground. But the village stood. It stood because gates were held shut, roofs were tied, children were saved, and in the heart of it, a human had given his strength when he had none. When at last the storm began to fade, leaving silence and broken stone behind, the villagers stepped out slowly. The air was filled with dust, the night cold and quiet. The human lay on the ground, the beasts circling him, growling at anyone who came too close. The girl knelt beside him, tears on her cheeks. Please stay with me, she whispered. The villagers gathered, their faces pale with shame and wonder. They had judged him a fool, but he had been their strength in the storm. The elder stood silent, his words gone, and in that silence, the people began to whisper something new. Not fool, not outsider, but hero. The storm was gone, but its mark remained. The village lay broken in silence. Sand covering the streets, walls cracked, roofs torn apart. Fires smoldered where lightning had struck, and the air still smelled of dust and smoke. The villagers came out slowly, blinking through the haze. They looked around at what was left, but their eyes always returned to the center of the square, where the human lay. The beast stood guard around him, their golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark, their bodies low and tense. Anyone who stepped too close was met with a warning growl. The alien girl knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she touched his chest. His breaths were shallow, his lips cracked, his skin pale like ash. She whispered, "Stay with me, please." Please, but his eyes were closed, his strength gone. The one who had saved her beasts, the one who had saved children, the one who had helped hold the gates, he was slipping away. The villagers stood in uneasy silence. They had mocked him, judged him, called him a fool, yet now their village stood because of him. Without his sacrifice, the gates would have fallen, the children would have died. A murmur rose among them. He gave everything. And now he has nothing left. What do we do? The elder stepped forward, his robe torn from the storm, his face grim. He looked at the human, then at the girl. "This is the price of foolishness," he said coldly. "He wasted water, and the desert has claimed him. We cannot waste more. If we give him what little we have, others will suffer." The girl's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with fury. Suffer? Who suffers now because of him? Not the children he saved, not the gates he held. You would be buried in sand if not for him. The crowd stirred, whispers growing louder. Some nodded at her words, others shook their heads, torn between fear of scarcity and guilt for their cruelty. The elder raised his voice again, sharp and cutting. "He is not one of us. He chose his death when he gave his water to beasts. We cannot change what is written." The girl pressed her hands against the human's chest, her voice trembling. "Then I will change it. I will not let him die." She reached for the water pouch at her side, the last small portion she carried, meant for herself. Her hand shook as she opened it, lifting it to his lips. The villagers gasped. She gives her own share. She will not survive if she does this. But the girl did not listen. She poured carefully, letting a few drops fall into his mouth. At first there was no response. Then his throat moved, swallowing weakly. The beasts pressed closer, watching. Silently, their breath heavy and warm, the elder's voice thundered, "Stop this madness. You throw away your future for an outsider. You shame us all." The girl looked up at him, her eyes full of tears but steady. "No, you shame yourselves. You call water more valuable than life. But what good is water if we have no soul left? This human showed more honor than all of you. If you let him die now, then you prove yourselves less than him." The villagers fell silent, her words cut deeper than the storm. Mothers held their children tighter, remembering the moment stones fell and the human had shielded them. Fathers remembered the gates, how he had pressed his body against the wood. When none of them had dared, the shame grew heavy on their hearts. The human stirred weakly, his eyes opening a little. He looked at the girl, his voice barely a whisper. "Why? Why give what you need? You will die too." The girl shook her head quickly, pressing the pouch to his lips again. "Because you gave first. Because you taught me what my people forgot, that life matters. I will not watch you fade away." He swallowed again, his breath growing a little stronger, though his body still trembled. The beasts nuzzled against him, their low sounds vibrating. In the night like a song of loyalty, the elder scowled, but for the first time his voice shook. He looked at the villagers and saw doubt in their eyes. He saw children looking at the human with awe. He saw mothers whispering prayers for him. And he knew his authority was breaking. The girl's hands tightened on the human's arm. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered. "I will fight for you, just as you fought for us." The villagers began to murmur again, but this time the words were different. "He saved us. She is right. He gave more than we ever would. Maybe we owe him our lives." The elder opened his mouth to speak, but no. Words came, because deep inside, even he knew the truth. Without the human, the village would have been buried, and without the girl, the human would already be gone. The beasts lay around the human, forming a shield, their eyes glowing like fire. In the night, the villagers stepped back, realizing that these creatures, once dying, were now his guardians. The desert had judged, but it had not claimed him yet. The girl held him close, whispering softly, "Rest, you are safe now. I will not let them take you. I promise." The village watched in silence, their judgment shifting, no longer seeing a fool, no longer seeing an outsider, but something else, something rare, something greater. And though the elder said nothing more, the truth was already alive in every heart. The human had given his last drop, but in doing so, he had poured new life into all of them. The desert night was still at last. The storm had passed, leaving the village scarred but standing. The air smelled of dust and smoke. Roofs were broken, walls cracked, but the people were alive, alive because of one man who now lay on the cold ground, too weak to stand. The alien girl sat beside him, her hand holding his tightly. Her beasts lay around them like guardians of stone, their glowing eyes watching the crowd. The villagers gathered in silence, shame and awe heavy in their hearts. They had judged him, they had mocked him, but now their own eyes had seen the truth. The human had no water, no strength, no promise of reward. Yet he had given all he had, again and again. To the beasts, to the children, to the very village that spat at him. And now he lay between life and death, saved only because the girl had chosen to share her last drop. The elder stood at the front of the crowd, his shoulders heavy, his eyes troubled. For the first time in many years, his words failed him. He looked at the human, then at the villagers, and he saw doubt in their eyes, not for the human, but for him. The girl's voice broke the silence, trembling but strong. "You all saw it. You all saw what he did. He gave what none of us would give. He risked everything when you would not risk anything. And you called him fool?" Her words echoed through the square. No one laughed, no one sneered this time. Mothers clutched their children tighter, remembering the moment stones had fallen. Fathers bowed their heads, remembering how the human had held the gates when their strength had failed. The elder tried to speak. "He is not one of us." But the crowd cut him off. With a shout, "He saved us." Another voice cried, "Without him we would be dead." And another, trembling with tears, "He gave his life for our children." The elder froze, his authority cracking like the walls around them. The people no longer followed his voice, they followed the memory of what they had seen. And what they had seen was a human who chose to suffer so they could live. The human stirred faintly, his eyes opening halfway. He looked at the girl, whispering, They still hate me." The girl shook her head quickly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "No, they are learning. They are finally seeing." She turned back to the villagers, her voice sharper now. "Look at him. He gave his last drop for my beasts. He gave his strength to save your homes. He gave his body to shield your children. And what did you give him? Nothing, not even kindness." The villagers bowed their heads in shame. One woman stepped forward, carrying her own water skin. Her hands trembled as she knelt, pouring water carefully into the human's mouth. The beasts growled at first, but the girl calmed them, and the man swallowed slowly. More villagers came, bringing their shares of water, small amounts, each precious. They poured little by little, enough to ease his pain. The human blinked weakly, confused. Why help me now?" he whispered. A young boy stepped forward, his voice clear. "Because you helped us first." The words spread through the crowd like fire. The people nodded, their shame turning into respect. The girl's chest tightened with relief finally. They were seeing the truth. The elder lowered his head, his voice heavy. "Perhaps we forgot what it means to value life. Perhaps it takes an outsider to remind us." He looked at the human with something close to respect. "You are not a fool. You are greater than us all." The human closed his eyes, too weak to reply, but his hand tightened faintly around the girl's fingers. And in that small motion, she knew he had heard. The beasts lay down close, their bodies pressing against him for warmth. The villagers watched in silence. They no longer saw a stranger, no longer saw an outsider. They saw a protector, a savior, something rare in the cold desert, a being who valued life above all else. As dawn rose, the light of the sun broke over the desert, painting the sky with fire. The village stood broken, but alive, and hope returned with the morning. The girl whispered softly, "Only a human would give his last drop for another's life." The villagers repeated her words like a prayer, and from that day forward, the story spread beyond the walls, carried across the desert, a story of beasts saved, of children protected, of a village standing after the storm, a story of a human who had nothing, yet gave everything. And in places where water was more precious than gold, where mercy was forgotten, the memory of that one act burned brighter than the sun. Humanity was remembered, not for its strength, not for its power, but for its heart.